And she kissed the corpse.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
She kissed Mr. Houston's corpse. You know, Hollywood's a very kissy town, Lieutenant.
Welcome to episode 67 of the Columbo podcast, where the kisses are more Glaswegian than Hollywood.
That's true. Not quite as pleasant either.
No. How are we?
Very well.
Very well.
Very well.
Why?
Just in a good mood today.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't
Also-
look it.
Well, thanks. That's just my face.
Sorry.
We're getting near the end.
We are. It's exciting and there's a sadness there as well, I think.
Yes, we are winding down.
We are. And this week we have an episode which would not be out of place towards the start of this run, I think.
Absolutely. Some have called it the last highlight.
I would agree. Without wanting to spoil the remaining two episodes for you, Ian, but they're dross in comparison.
But hopefully not the last good podcast.
Hopefully not. So we have Patrick McGoohan returning, don't we?
Everybody's favourite actor and least favourite director.
He directed this.
He did.
I thought he'd done a good job. Decent job.
He did.
In terms of directing.
This is his best directorial effort, in my opinion.
Excellent acting performance, although you can sense that he likes to play the same type of character.
Well, I was going to make a similar point. I thought it was quite a close character to his previous one,
Oscar Finch?
Oscar Finch, but subtly different.
Yes.
Not quite as calculating.
No. Were you worried when you realised that this episode is going to take place almost entirely in a funeral parlour and around mourners, bearing in mind what we know about Columbo's antics?
Yes.
He behaved himself.
Mostly.
Mm-hmm.
He had one little slip, but he was mostly okay.
Okay, we can get to that. Before we do, fancy giving us this week's summary?
I suppose.
Or death march? Let's have it.
In Ashes to Ashes, we are introduced to Eric Prince, a man used to stealing from the dead, who graduates to creating a new dead person when his criminal enterprise is threatened with exposure by tabloid reporter Verity Chandler. With the use of his convenient cremation oven, disposing of bodies is a simple task and makes Columbo's task all the harder when he is called on to investigate Chandler's disappearance. With no evidence of a killing, and no certainty that the victim failed to return home on the night of her disappearance, can the lieutenant turn up the heat and pin the murderer down, or will he see his hopes of a conviction evaporate?
Thank you for that unbelievable summary. Not again, unbelievable.
No, I was just waiting for that tumbleweed to go by before I spoke again.
Okay. I thought I was going to have to interrupt you, but I managed to prevent my coughing.
I did think this would have been a fitting title for a final episode of the show.
Perhaps that was the intention.
Maybe.
Where do we begin?
For once, it's not an aerial cityscape. We've got a residential street at night, and we see a funeral parlour.
We do. We see a priest or a vicar, some clergyman,
Ministerial fellow, yes.
reading a eulogy for an actor and a war hero, and the camera pulls back to reveal an audience of one who is timing the speech. And this is Eric Prince, who we mentioned, played by Patrick McGoohan.
He's essentially directing the funeral. He wants everything to run exactly to schedule.
Like clockwork, and he informs the clergyman that he needs to cut 90 seconds from it. A very meticulous man, and this is, as we pointed out, very reminiscent of Oscar Finch.
Yes.
So the clergyman agrees to rework his eulogy in time for the service in a few days' time, or is it the next day?
I think it's the next day.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of other members of staff there who are sent home.
Yes. Prince then receives a phone call from whom?
Verity.
Verity who?
Chandler.
And she asks for a private chat before the service. She's overly lovey-dovey and darling and Hollywood kissing.
Very Hollywood, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting note, at her end of the call, she watches a programme called Hollywood Heartbeat, which has the theme tune.
Of course.
That was the same as the news show Fielding Chase was watching.
Yep, and the same as you'd mentioned during that podcast episode of the DVD
Menu,
yeah.
There you go. So, was Fielding Chase watching Hollywood Heartbeat? No, is the answer to that question. She makes a note in her diary to show up 12 noon, Houston Fun, PHSB.
But before she makes that note, we understand that she is a Hollywood gossip and is apparently going to reveal a few grisly skeletons in her upcoming show.
Well, yeah, the Hollywood Heartbeat trail, essentially, that she's watching, is a promo for her own reporting coming up. She talks about skeletons in Sunset Boulevard, I think, something along those lines.
Now, this must be the first time that the internet is referenced in Columbo. We see she mentions her Hollywood_heartbeat.com website. There's a mention of email in this episode as well.
There is later on, but it was quite early days. In 98 this came out.
Yeah.
That would be not everybody would have email.
No, you could understand Columbo being confused by this technology. We'll forgive him that, I think. It's not a fax machine.
I remember back in 98, it would have been registering my first email
Hotmail
addresses.
account?
No, it was Lycos, and I chose that because you had a selection of about 20 domain endings.
Right.
So I'd choose something hilarious, like Iain at 3cows.net or something ridiculous.
Yep, you always did have a sense of humour there, Ian.
It was witty, that's what it was.
Yeah.
That was just an example. Don't email me at that address.
It's the next day, and we see Verity applying her lipstick. She leaves the house by cab at 11:30, and she takes a picture of someone else's palatial home. She puts it into her handbag, her clutch, I think they call it.
And the taxi is taking her on,
Yes, to the funeral parlour.
where the guests are arriving.
Did you recognise Verity Chandler?
Yes.
Where from?
She was in... Now, let me think. What did I see
Come
on
on, Ian.
It wasn't her main thing. There was something else that she was in. She played somebody's...
Dreadful. She died in 2010, aged 76, and she is, of course, most well known for playing Blanche Devereaux in The Golden Girls.
I knew that, but there's a movie that she was in fairly towards the end of her career that she was fairly familiar from, but I can't remember what it was.
No doubt, she's done lots of things. She earned 3 Golden Globe nominations, 4 Emmy nominations, and she won an Emmy for her performance as Blanche. She was also in Maud, with another Golden Girl, Dorothy. Mama's Family and Apple Pie. She was also a vegan and quite a committed animals rights activist. She'd been married 6 times.
Very interesting.
We are inside the funeral home just before the service begins. Prince speaks with a Liz Houston, the widow of the deceased, who asks him to sit with her, and she describes Verity as the Red Death, as she makes a show of walking in straight to the open casket and placing a kiss on the deceased.
Yeah, leaving a massive lipstick mark on his cheek.
That's inappropriate. Now, you've mentioned fairly recently that you are not too happy with the whole open casket malarkey.
No. I'm particularly unhappy when people go around touching the body. One of the staff members, Rita, removes the lipstick mark with a handkerchief, and Prince is called out of the service
to meet with his attorney, who has arrived with an urgent matter. So they go through to his office, and he's there to hand over a signed document finalising the purchase of his, I think, 24th funeral parlour. So this guy just, he's a very successful businessman. It's not just one home that he owns. Yeah,
the attorney leaves. He's not heard from again, but the purchase of this funeral home, I think, is significant.
There is talk of his former mentor, Mr. Haverland, and that's the name of the business. I think it's Haverland Prince.
Yes.
Haverland is now himself deceased.
Yes.
And Eric owns and runs this entire operation.
He seems to.
We take a trip to the preparation room, and Verity enters, and she surprises Prince.
Well, Prince is making his way back. He came this way from the service to his office, and now he's going back the same way. But as he enters the room, Verity enters from a different door.
Under the guise of requiring advice.
I want your advice on a story I'm working on for Sunday night's broadcast. It's about a once handsome, never was actor from England, didn't make it here either, who gets a job in a Hollywood mortuary. And the mortician takes a liking to him, and soon the actor becomes a mortician himself. Only our boy, Undertaker, gets greedy. He realizes that morticians can get to the bodies before anyone else, can find telltale traces of homosexuality, affairs, drugs. So he begins selling his information to a television reporter, who also becomes his oh-so-secret lover. until he unceremoniously dumps her.
But that's old news.
Oh, this is even older. I shot this just a few days ago.
It's the Dorothea Page mansion.
Somehow I knew you'd recognize it. Just as I know you'll remember what was around Dorothea Page's neck when her body arrived at your mortuary some years ago. Tell me, Eric, what kind of ratings do you think I might get for a story about a Hollywood mortician who steals a diamond necklace from the corpse of a dead movie queen so he can buy into a fancy mortuary?
Sounds fascinating.
Doesn't it? I'm hot on your trail, sweetie, and getting warmer by the minute.
I know your games, Verity. You're telling me all this and I'll start digging up the dirt for you again.
Darling, no, you're not listening. This isn't blackmail. I'm broadcasting this Sunday night at 8 live.
What I want to know is, what are those telltale signs?
Can only guess. Anyway, Dorothea is mentioned there, Dorothea Page. We had a Dorothea a few weeks ago, didn't we?
Yes. McNally, maybe, or something along those lines?
Played by Tyne Daly's character in
Undercover.
Again, the writers haven't bothered to come up with a new name. Dorothea. We had that a few weeks ago. I suppose it's a few years ago now, but still.
Yeah, it's not very original.
No. How hard is it to come up with original names?
Harder than you'd think, apparently. They're probably looking at, well, Dorothea, that worked in that episode. Let's stick with the tried and tested.
If it ain't broke, no one complained about the names, let's keep using them.
We've used the same names for all 67 episodes so far.
Verity continues to taunt Prince, which is not a wise idea.
Well, she makes the stupid mistake of saying she hasn't told a soul about this discovery.
How does Prince react?
Well, he picked up a huge metal thing, which I think he's going to stab her with and run it right through. I think this is going to be gruesome. But he just thumps her over the head.
He does, and as she is lying on the ground, there's a vicious second blow, which is unnecessary considering what he does.
Yeah, but it's also remarkably tidy because there's no blood on the floor, there's no sign of anything.
It is also remarkably similar to the murder he committed in Identity Crisis. He struck Leslie Nielsen like that from behind and then hit him again as he was on the ground.
He did. He used to say, you can tell in the motion, can't you? It's the same sort of short-armed flick.
We then see Rita come to the preparation room door, and it's been locked, and Prince exits. He looks harassed, as you would.
Absolutely.
It's time for the service.
He makes his way back in, sits with the widow.
And the priest, he begins to speak about the deceased life, and specifically the medals that he won in conflict, and as he's doing so, we see or hear Prince replay the threat from Verity in his mind.
Yeah. The funeral seems to go according to plan, though, and I think they hit all the marks for timing.
After it, Prince wheels the casket into the preparation room, and he somehow manages to swap the bodies of Chuck, who is
the deceased
of the day,
yeah.
or the first deceased.
Yes.
So he takes him out and he places Verity in his...
And they must have been very stiff.
Oh, well, they would be. That's why they're called stiffs.
Mm.
But still, he didn't look the sort of guy at his age and his physique who could be lifting up bodies.
No.
It's not that easy. I'll tell you that.
He looked impractical.
We'll forgive that. So Chuck is now in cold storage and Verity is sent through to the burner, the furnace, the chamber.
Prince removes her shoes and bag first, though.
Sorry, yeah, I just have to say, we keep referring to him as Prince, and all I can, in my mind's eye, I just see this wee guy in purple, a pair of stacked heels on, showing off his chest, and yeah.
Yeah.
It's not that Prince.
Could it be? Anyway. Yes, the note I have is he must be quite strong. We don't notice, but he also takes the earrings, I believe, that she's wearing, puts those things aside, and then...
Her shoes as well.
Yeah, in her handbag. And puts her in the furnace.
Yeah.
What I didn't understand is why did he not just put Houston in with it?
There was no room. You see, later on when he does it, we learn that the deceased is a tiny wee man, and Chuck Taylor is not, so she would not have fitted into the coffin with him. He had to wait for a smaller person.
Okay. Also a smaller coffin, because the next man's burned in a cardboard box.
But then again, I suppose you don't have to burn it at the same time in that coffin. You could do him as you would normally do him, and then just throw her in without a coffin.
Yep. Or either way, burn her, as you know, we would have burned him, then throw him in later. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's the ideal tool, isn't it? If you're looking to dispose of a body, if you happen to own and know how to operate what are they called?
Furnace or an oven, yeah.
Yeah, you're pretty much set, aren't you?
As long as nobody's watching.
Mm-hmm.
In a rather cruel move, he then passes Verity's ashes to Liz to scatter as though they were her husband's.
Yes, she takes them, as well as the Purple Heart, which he gives to her.
Yes.
Departs by helicopter, the parlor's helicopter, and she scatters what she believes to be Chuck's ashes over the Hollywood sign. Illegal.
Apparently.
We're over to Verity's home, and wearing a boiler suit and rubber gloves, Prince tops up her brandy glass. Not really sure why that was necessary, but anyway.
Well, I don't know why any of this was necessary.
Sets down her shoes and... Well, I'll tell you why. It's because he's trying to make it look as if she was taken from home and not where she was last.
But her body's been destroyed completely, so there's no... I suppose she was last seen there. But I think the other reason is that the computer has the story about him.
So that's what he sets down her shoes, her earrings, before using her computer to delete the expose on him and replace it with one about cocaine use in Beverly Hills. And I think the story... You see, if you look at the some of the articles, it talks about Baywatch. And then the story that he types up is about the Young and the Reckless.
Yep.
Which is obviously a play on Young and the Restless, which is a soap opera, which some of the cast have been in.
It's interesting to see how far technology has come, even since George Hamilton did this same thing.
Yeah, I mean, these days, you can't get away with that anyway. You can't just change the date and then hope that,
Yeah, no, that wouldn't work.
No, forensic computer experts.
Well, even in those days, though, because I remember it was a Mac computer, and we had Macs in school at that exact time, 97, 98. I would have been about 16, 17, and there were programs available to retrieve deleted files. That was one of the things that you would do. I would have thought that would be the first thing the police would have done to that computer. But then, the fact that he saved over it, maybe that doesn't affect it in the same way. Maybe it wouldn't have been recoverable.
Shenanigans.
Yeah. Wouldn't get away with it now. Or at least you'd have to be cleverer now.
So what he's doing is, much like in Hazardous, he's setting up a fake story that this person was working on to point the police in a different direction.
Yeah.
We then have the fake burglary ransack trope.
Oh, it's awful. It's not the last trope of this episode either.
Oh, it's certainly not. Before we see him arrive with champagne at Lizzie's house. So are they lovers, or is he just making a play?
No, I think they're lovers.
Yeah, they are. We find that out.
Because she's asked him to sit with her at the funeral already. Highly inappropriate to sit with your lover at your husband's funeral, I would say. But anyway, he arrives with the champagne and condolences.
We're at Verity's home again, but it's now the crime scene, and we see a flamboyant and aggressive chap who is Roger Gambles, Verity's secretary.
Yeah.
And he's showing his unhappiness at a sergeant who is explaining that they're doing all they can in this missing persons case, which is all it is at the moment.
Yeah, and Columbo shows up for a missing persons case unusually, with his dog.
Yeah, I think they give an explanation for that, don't they?
Yeah, DeGarmo says he called him in specifically because the exact quote I think it was is, "I know it's not a homicide, but Mr. Gambles is somewhat concerned." How does that make it unique amongst, surely in every missing persons case someone's concerned?
Yep. Yeah, so Columbo enters with dog, and he immediately gets Roger's name wrong.
It's brilliant. I like his interaction with Roger because he has no respect for this guy.
No.
Roger starts to tell his story and is clearly annoyed at Columbo as well. And Columbo immediately stops him because dog's agitating about something.
Yeah, we see the dog sniffing around at a door before Roger explains that he got worried when he could not reach Verity and came over to find the place in this state, and so therefore he called the cops.
I made a note that Roger's a bit of a pain, but I suppose if you look at it from his point of view, it's really Columbo that's being unreasonable.
I think Columbo's been entirely unprofessional and disrespectful. Your employer, perhaps your friend, is certainly missing. There are obvious signs of a struggle and violence, and you can't be bothered to get his name right. And when he's trying to speak to you, explain his side of the story, you wander off to look at your dog who you've brought to a crime scene.
To your work, yes.
Again, contaminating. You can't do that. You can't allow a dog to run.
It's not even a working dog. It's not a police dog. It just belongs to a policeman.
Absolutely scandalous. Back in the 70s, you might have got away with it because forensic weren't as used as much, weren't as powerful. But now they should be knowing. I'm just trying to think, yes, because when was O.J. Simpson?
Around that time.
Before this time. Before 97. Simpson, what, 94?
Well, possibly 94 rings a bell.
Yeah, 94, 95. So by this point, everyone, not just the cops, but everyone knew about forensics and how not to treat a crime scene. And yet Columbo wanders in with a dog. Abysmal.
It's crazy. And he's not stopped or challenged by anybody. But anyway.
And even looking back to last week, we had a cat move a vital piece of evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, now that you couldn't have prevented that because the cat lived there, but it shows you what can happen when animals are left to roam free.
I'm not sure the humans do much better, though.
No.
Roger eventually does get Columbo's attention. They look
Yeah.
at the computer and then at sort of the diary and some photographs.
Sergeant DeGarmo explains what he thinks happened, and they find that the last entry on this PC was at 8:40 p.m. And then they make huge leaps. They assume this is why she's no longer there. Why would you assume that?
I don't know.
Just because we're working on something, that must be the reason. So what they're saying is that, coincidentally, the people who came to harm you came just at the time you were actually writing an article.
About them?
About them.
Yeah. I don't know.
Bonkers.
Yeah.
If I went missing and looked at the last thing I was looking at the computer.
They take a look at the note in the diary that we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And they try and figure out what the letters might stand for. They think PH could be phone somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And Roger's able to confirm that Houston Fun means the funeral.
Correct. Columbo then looks at the 11 pictures of Verity's dog, and something stands out for him here.
He doesn't like 11 pictures.
No, you wouldn't.
Can you imagine that nowadays if you could only take 12 photos?
Yeah.
People would run out in about 10 minutes.
Less than that.
Yeah.
If you go to some event,
You have to choose the thing to take a picture of. You
Yeah.
could just take all the pictures.
a different world in a different world.
I remember having a camera you had to wind on in between shots.
In any case, the pictures of the dog reminds Roger of Luella.
Who he's completely ignored since he's been there.
Yep, and this is the reason that dog was pining at the door. Columbo is upset about the condition of a pup that they find.
Yep.
And he goes to get at some food. He's very upset. He's angry. Columbo is here.
He's very angry.
But he's interested to discover that a chicken dish in the fridge was apparently the puppy's evening treat.
And has not been used.
It's not. Now, before Columbo leaves, he tells DeGarmo to make copies of the pictures from the negatives.
Yep.
And then he asks where the funeral service was being held. Roger was played by Spencer Garrett. He was born in 1963. He has been in Yes Man, Air Force One, Satisfaction, The Invisible Man, The X-Files, Murder One, Murder, She Wrote, and Star Trek Voyager. Where do we head off to next?
The funeral home. There's a near divorcee arrives. Doesn't want to spend any money.
Yes. So Rita, who is one of the employees, is discussing upcoming funerals with Prince before meeting this woman, this is Mrs. Lurby,
That's right.
who wants as little to do with her late husband, or nearly ex-husband, as possible. So they were about to be divorced before he died, and she's upset because she has to get involved in these arrangements.
A lot of hassle for her.
Prince agrees to take care of the body in the most economical manner and deal with it himself. And it's not clear immediately while we're watching this, but we find out later she's describing this weedy little fellow who wasn't up to much.
Yeah.
And that's, well, we mentioned,
Helpful.
it's helpful because you might be able to fit more than one body in a casket.
Yes.
Rita then informs Prince that any further cremations will have to wait as a repairman needs to fix one of the heaters that blew when he cremated Chuck. And she also tells him that he has a visitor waiting for him. Now, the whole breaking down of the burner didn't play any other
No,
part.
but it was a red herring that you could get excited about at this point.
Mrs. Lurby was played by Edie McClurg. Born in 1951. She has been in Melrose Place, Ellie Law, Valerie, Small Wonder, but most people, certainly of my generation, my age, know her for Grace in Ferris Bueller.
I'm too young for that.
You've not seen Ferris Bueller?
Nope.
Grace!
Interesting, this episode, what, about 97-ish?
Mm-hmm.
So Patrick McGowan would be about the same age as he was in Braveheart.
I've not seen
I
Braveheart.
think it's filmed around the same time. He looks much older than that. He plays a much older character.
Who is the visitor that's waiting for Eric Prince?
Probably Columbo, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's his show.
We have a funny little intro as we see smoke billow from behind a coffin.
Yeah, we get a couple of tropes. We've got a trope about inappropriate smoking, and then a trope about not realising Columbo's a policeman.
I suppose in a crematorium, smoking is very appropriate.
I suppose in a certain way.
He mentions, another trope, he mentions his wife's reluctance to discuss such matters as arranging funerals and death.
Yes, he's got to be thinking about a funeral plan. He's that age.
Yeah. He IDs himself and he explains why he is there, and Prince admits that Verity was there and that they have a professional relationship.
Absolutely.
Columbo asks how she travelled to his place of business that day, and Prince says that he assumes it was in her red Mercedes. Columbo then shows him the diary entry.
They talk about these initials at the bottom of it, and they think PH might be phone, and Prince is questioned whether there was anybody at the funeral with the initials SB, and he names all the luminaries.
Do you know anybody who was invited or who came to the funeral services with the initials SB?
Sonny Bono, Sandra Bullock, Stephen Botchko.
Bono, Bullock, Botchko. Wow. Yeah, you really get the big ones. The creme de la creme, sir. That's French.
Do you know of Dan Riley?
Dan Riley, the big dancer from the movies?
Yeah, he died yesterday, 78 years old.
Oh, he was up there with the greats.
Yeah, we're having the viewing later this afternoon and then the burial tomorrow.
Oh, gee whiz, that's funny.
What?
What you just said. You said that you always call Miss Chandler regarding VIP funerals. You know, I was just at the Chandler house and we checked her answering machine. There were only 3 messages since yesterday, all from her secretary, and, no, sir, there was no message from you regarding Dan Riley's funeral.
I must reprimand myself.
Yeah, we didn't mention the thing about the phone calls, but Prince had made it clear earlier that part of this relationship he had with Chandler was that when there was a celebrity funeral, she'd be tipped off.
Indeed. Columbo then asks again about Verity's car, and Prince asks Rita to check their log and help Columbo. It's odd that they've got a log for every car.
Yeah, some places have that. You have to sign in and put your number plate down. Are we going to let that Stephen Botchko reference go without comment?
It's an odd one. I think that obviously we and Columbo aficionados know who Botchko is, but in the context of Sonny Bono and Sandra Bullock, if you're a casual Columbo fan, I think you might be thinking, who? Botchko?
Yeah.
Nice inside joke. I didn't mind it. Did you?
Well, you could tell the actors enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. Just the way they delivered those lines.
So Columbo follows Rita to the office and she gives him a list of all the car registration and confirms that Verity did not arrive by her own car. She got a taxi, and the last that she saw of her was of her putting a brochure into her purse. And Columbo wonders why.
Yeah, and they talk also about her kissing the corpse.
Yeah, and Columbo asks for the hanky that Rita used to wipe the lipstick off. And this is odd, because why right now would you think that's important? She says she kissed the corpse. I even had to wipe off the lipstick. And Columbo immediately says, oh, with what?
Yeah.
That wouldn't...
Because he's already seen lipstick on the glass at the house. So he's maybe just want to confirm the match.
Possibly. A little bit of Columbo magic there for me. He's went right to something like that.
She brought it up, though. He does head back to the house. Verity's house.
Yep, he's going over the setup and what he knows before noticing that something is missing from Verity's handbag.
Yeah, we get the idiot's note from his notebook for idiot viewers. Once again, the audience being patronised in the later episodes.
What does it read?
I can't remember.
Idiot.
I think it says, did she get home or not?
Yeah.
Along those lines.
It wasn't made clear, but when he was looking in the handbag, there's 2 things in the handbag. One thing that's in it, one thing that should be in it. So I don't think the brochure is in the handbag any longer.
No, I think it got cremated.
Yeah. But the lipstick is.
Yes.
We'll come to that later.
Okay.
Sergeant DeGarmo arrives with news. There was indeed a missing picture, and he has a blow-up of it. And what is it?
It's the gate to a house. Now, amusingly, Columbo quite often asks for these things to be blown up and enlarged, but he doesn't even use the blow-ups in this episode.
Nah. They don't, however, know who owns the house, or where the original picture is.
No, they don't even know where the house is.
No. However, Columbo then works out that PH stands for photograph.
Yeah, he's certain now. It's not like it may be one or the other. It's, yep, definitely photograph. I've got a photograph, therefore this means photograph.
Sergeant de Garmo was played by Richard Rell, born in 1948. This is his first of 2 Columbo episodes.
Leaving it late.
Yeah. He has been in Office Space, The Young and the Restless, mentioned before, Grounded for Life, Murder, She Wrote, LA Law, and he played Ed Rooney in Ferris Bueller, the TV show. So Ed Rooney was Grace, the secretary's, he was the dean.
Right.
He has also been in Star Trek Enterprise, Voyager, and Next Generation. And Edie McClurg thinks that he is a righteous dude.
We head over to Liz Houston's home.
Yes, Prince is there and he is telling Liz that she drinks too much when the phone goes. And it's Columbo who wants her to stop by Verity's home. Now, Prince, as you can imagine, is quite curious, perhaps worried about why Columbo wants this, so he decides to drive her over there.
Also, she's had a drink.
Yeah.
Although they're not always that bothered about drink driving in Columbo.
Yeah. So we head over to Verity's house. They arrive and are greeted by Columbo, who asks questions for them both. He asks Prince where he was from 8 p.m. the previous night, and at this point they're both forced to admit that they were together. He was giving Liz some personal grief counselling right through the night until the morning. Quite a session.
That's a euphemism if ever I heard one.
Not one that I'd like to use. Hey baby, want to come up to my place for some grief counselling? Yeah. I mean, in fairness, after they've been there, it's often what they require. But it's not a pick-up line that I've used in the past.
It goes unsaid. Prince asks Columbo to keep his confidence about what they'd been up to, and as he does, Liz is magnetically drawn to the drinks.
Yeah, she pours herself a bourbon before Columbo asks about how she would treat a puppy, and reveals that the dog had not been fed, and Liz correctly confirms that she would not forget to do such a thing.
Yeah, Columbo obviously thinks this is odd that Verity would use the computer and take her shoes and stuff off and ignore the dog.
Mm-hmm. Liz offers the more likely scenario, that the trouble happened before she had a chance to tend to the dog.
That doesn't fit with the computer being used and the shoes being off.
It doesn't. Columbo has questions for Liz about shoes and earrings.
Yeah, she confirms they're the ones that Verity was wearing, or likely the ones that Verity wore to the funeral. And then the issue of the lipstick comes up.
I happened to look into this pocketbook. This is the pocketbook that she was carrying at the funeral. And sure enough, this lipstick. And this lipstick matches the lipstick on this handkerchief. So this lipstick is the lipstick that she was wearing during the day yesterday. Question. Why, when she came home at night, why did she take off her day lipstick and put on dark evening lipstick to sit here alone by herself and type? Would you do that, ma'am?
Oh, I'm a little confused.
You know, they told me that she was working on this computer at 8:40. And maybe she was, I don't know. But they also tell me you push the right buttons right now. Don't ask me what they are. You could erase that 8:40 p.m. and put in 11:30 a.m. last Christmas, so who knows? Only the shadow knows.
I am not sure if I share the same concern about the lipstick as Columbo does.
Well, there's one question that doesn't get asked.
What's that?
We're assuming that Prince has used Liz's lipstick to do this. So has he checked if Verity even has that shade of lipstick?
Sorry, explain.
The lipstick on the glass
Yeah.
was one that Prince borrowed from Liz.
No,
Where did he get it from?
it was already there. He just topped up the
that's fine
glass.
then. It's just a coincidence that Liz is wearing the same one.
She's not. It was just to get her to talk about the different shades. They were comparing her lipstick to the lipstick on the glass and the lipstick on the handkerchief.
Yes, they said her lipstick was the same as the lipstick on the glass.
No.
Okay, if you're happy.
Yeah. No, what I'm not happy about is I think there's a number of explanations as to why Verity may have changed lipstick. Perhaps she was intending to go out later, or perhaps she was expecting a guest.
Perhaps. But then the guest would have found her, or found the trouble. And
Yeah, but perhaps the guest was the person who killed her.
maybe someone she knew.
Or had taken her away, yeah.
They try to leave, but Columbo has one more thing to ask.
Which is?
Whether they recognise the gate in the photograph.
They do not.
They claim not to.
Liz Houston was played by Sally Kellerman, born in 1937, most famous without a doubt for playing Hot Lips in MASH the movie. She was Oscar nominated and Golden Globe nominated for that role. She was also in Back to School, a good Rodney Dangerfield comedy, The Young and the Restless, Brewster McCloud, and quite recently she was in Maron,
Right?
the Mark Maron comedy series.
You mean our fellow podcaster and colleague?
Yep, our associate.
Yes.
Indeed. And I believe, I've not watched the show, but I believe she played Maron's mother.
Right. There you go.
Back at the prep room, and Prince cremates both Lerby and Chuck together
I think you made them top and tail.
before putting the remains into Lerby's urn.
Yes.
Cab company. That's where we head off to next.
Eddie Finelli.
Yeah. Columbo appears to have a desk, and he speaks with the cab driver Eddie, who confirms that he dropped Verity off at the funeral home, but he knows nothing else.
He didn't wait for her, he didn't take her home.
Nah. Columbo then discovers something.
Well, another driver comes in and starts chatting away.
Well, he says later that's his cousin or his nephew.
It's obviously not his cousin or his nephew.
Why not?
Because he doesn't recognise him when he comes in.
Maybe they had already spoke, so it's not like he'd already been introduced. They chatted. He went out the room. He's come back in. You don't
Maybe.
reintroduce
That's
yourself.
That's a bit of a leap, I think.
Well, how did he get that desk? He obviously didn't just walk in and sit at the desk himself. He's obviously been there for a while.
Maybe. Maybe it is his cousin.
I think it might be.
Okay.
His cousin was maybe the one that used to be the valet. Uneasy Lies the Crown.
Maybe.
He's
I
now
don't
moved
think
up
so.
from parking cars to driving them.
Maybe, but I don't think so.
Okay. In any case, what happens?
The driver puts HB up on the board and points out that stands for Hollywood Boulevard, and that tips Columbo off about SB.
Which is?
Sunset Boulevard.
Apparently. So we head over to Sunset Boulevard and we see the house in the picture.
Yep.
Columbo is in his car with the picture sellotaped to the dashboard, and this old man is playing in the background.
It is they should have played tunes from Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah, he gets up to the gate. This is weird. He grabs onto it, and what happens?
It opens.
Yeah, the alarm goes off and the gate opens. Now, I'm no security expert, but when the alarm goes off, that's not that's the time you shut things down.
Yeah, not open the
Not
gate
open
wide.
the gate. Nonsense.
Intruder!
Yeah.
Not until you open the gate, it wasn't.
But unfortunately for Columbo, he is immediately manhandled by a couple of security men.
Reminiscent of Strange Bedfellows.
Mm-hmm.
He's even yelling at them, I'm a cop.
Yep. I think he calls them a couple of monkeys.
Columbo's taken inside where we're helpfully introduced to Sheikh Harami by himself, talking in the third person.
He's a big movie fan, and he bought the house specifically because it used to belong to Dorothea Page. And we find out from him that when she died, police were interested in some missing diamonds.
Yeah, he says to Columbo, you must have heard of the case of the missing diamonds, but Columbo doesn't recall.
No. Columbo then shows the picture to the three of them.
It agitates the security guys because they recall the women taking the picture.
Quite an overreaction, isn't it?
It seems to be.
You would also think as well that if the Sheikh bought that house because he was such a fan of this movie star,
Yeah.
he would appreciate and understand other fans may want a snap of the famous lady's home.
Absolutely.
Especially in Hollywood, you must get people all the time taking pictures of the rich and
On
famous.
Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah. But turns out that they remember this woman, and what was she dressed like?
In red.
Yeah, like Verity. It was Verity.
She left by taxi.
She did. You won't recognise the Sheikh, I'm not going to bother asking you. But he has been in one of my favourite, or two of my favourite movies. He was played by Richard Libertini. He died just this January, aged 82. He has been in Awakenings, Lethal Weapon 4, Murder, She Wrote, L.A. Law, The Finelli Boys, Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, But for me personally, he will always be Frank, the editor from the Fletch movies.
Okay.
You need to watch Fletch.
I've not seen that.
Based on a series of books by Gregory MacDonald.
Okay.
So Columbo heads back over to Eddie's cab.
Well, he finds Eddie on a job. He's dropped someone somewhere and is waiting for him, and Columbo takes advantage of that moment to slip inside.
What does Columbo find out in this scene?
Essentially, he's able to coerce Eddie into saying that had he been involved in such a crime, here is how he would have done it.
Yeah. Apparently 6 years ago, he may or may not have been a fence for this jewellery, these diamonds that were stolen from Dorothea.
That's right. And Columbo shows him a photograph of Prince, and he identifies him as, if I had been fencing for someone, it would have been him.
He also confirms that possibly, he did take Verity to the house recently to take a picture.
Perhaps.
Again, no point me asking, but did you recognise Ron Mask, who played Eddie, the cab driver? No, you didn't. He was born in 1936. He has been in Ice Station Zebra, Tora, Quincy, Magnum, Police Story, but he was most famous for playing Sheriff Morton in Murder, She Wrote for a number of years.
Recurring your role.
Oh yes. Many, many, many appearances.
Okay.
You might find this interesting. He is regarded as, and considered to be, the world's first ever Elvis impersonator in 1956.
Really?
Yep. He was the first. He toured doing this before it became the thing to do.
Was that before Elvis toured?
Around about the same time. So yeah, as Elvis started, he started impersonating him.
Interesting. It obviously worked out for him. Here he is in Columbo.
Yep.
Pinnacle of his career.
Rock and roll lifestyle.
Sam?
We head over for another trope.
We're at the Association of Mortuaries and Crematoria Undertaker of the Year Awards.
We are. So we've seen this a few times. There's been many
Man of the Year
award ceremonies.
In Newport we had it.
Yes, we did. We also had McGowan in Identity Crisis. He was the speechwriter, remember?
Yeah.
Prince is making an acceptance speech as he wins that accolade as for Funeral Director of the Year, and Columbo walks in. And after the speech, he explains how he found out what SB stood for. And Prince suggests that they chat in private, so where do they go?
Well, Columbo talks about, this is where he mentioned about his cousin.
Yes.
So I think thereby exposing his entire series of lies about his family throughout the show.
Okay.
They get in a hearse, essentially, to talk with a coffin, and Columbo raises the topic of Dorothea Page.
But before that, there's a nice line, because Columbo sort of rummages around in his pocket, and Prince asks if Columbo always carries that paraphernalia.
Yeah,
articles.
If it's on purpose, yeah, I like that. Yeah, and then Columbo talks about Page, and the diamond necklace comes into the conversation.
Yeah, Prince recalls the night she died.
Dorothea Page.
It was her house. She died there.
Dorothea Page. One of my idols.
Oh, she was one of the greats, sir. A detective, Big George Tuttle, he's an old friend of mine. You know what he told me? He told me that when she died, there was $1 million diamond necklace on her body.
I can remember the very night. It was a Sunday, September 1979. Her body was brought to the Haviland Funeral Home.
You were there?
Yes.
At the home?
Yes. No, I was there.
Wow.
Well, it was after midnight. I was working very late. We had 4 big funerals the following day. I had a lot of preparation to do. And then the phone rang. Dorothea Page had died. Could the body be collected? So I sent the ambulance, and I just sat there, devastated, reliving my memories of her. And then the ambulance returned. The body was brought in, and then the phone rang again. And this time it was the police. And they said that inadvertently, a diamond necklace had been left around her neck before she was taken to the ambulance. And had I found it? So I said, of course not.
Well, you hadn't even pulled back the covers yet.
Exactly. So I told them to wait and that I'd go and check. So I pulled the cover back and no necklace.
Uh-oh.
Prince goes on to claim that he thinks that the help stole the diamond that evening.
Yeah.
So I think this is important because he's offering an explanation that perhaps is uncalled for, and I think that might stir Columbo's
To be fair, Columbo's already shown his picture to the taxi driver and confirmed that it was him that stole the diamonds.
Yeah, this is better. This is more proof.
Okay. There's a singer.
Mm-hmm.
Who I talked to you about briefly off tape earlier. As a guy who's been in
Tape? Sorry, tape?
Yes.
We don't use tape, Ian.
It's a figure of speech for something that's recorded.
It's not. You're making this up. This isn't industry terms. Off tape.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Off mic.
Yeah, that's better, but still, yeah.
I mentioned to you earlier, before we started recording this show, that this was a guy who had been in lots of things that were quite interesting, and I couldn't remember which character it was, and now I do. There's a terrible song.
Dreadful. The whole sing-song thing just annoys me.
But I think deliberately.
Yeah, they seem to enjoy it. The band play this, a unique version of He's a Jolly Good Fellow, and we hear a number of creepy wee obnoxious undertakers. There's one in particular that is a little oddball.
He's a creep.
He's a creep. And then they start getting drunk at the bar and annoying the bar staff.
Yeah, they try and excuse it by referring to having to have a morbid sense of humour, but there's no excuse for rudeness.
No, they were disgusting individuals. I'd have barred them. I'd have sent them packing.
Absolutely. Prince tries to cover their tails, though, and buys a round of drinks for everybody in the bar, at which point Columbo returns.
Yes, much to the annoyance of Prince, and shows him his notes that confirm that Verity was at the house and took a picture 3 days before the funeral. But why? Columbo then asks him to listen to a dictaphone, and he hears Verity mention this grisly story involving SB.
Well, it's more specific than that. She uses the phrase, grisly undertakings on Sunset Boulevard.
Yes.
It's the piece that we heard her listen to herself right at the start of the episode. The trail for her report. Correct.
Columbo then reveals his entirely correct suspicions to Prince before they are interrupted by another terrible medley of death-themed songs.
Columbo loves it.
There is then an understanding and an accepted impasse here. They both know what each other thinks, but they both know that as yet there is no proof.
There is a dance to be danced.
Where do we go next?
The studio, I've read?
Yeah, TV studio.
Roger's there.
Yep, he tells Columbo that he was not aware of Verity doing a story on the diamond theft, but he does have info relating to what?
Her pager.
Her phone pager.
Still a bit retro, isn't it, for 1997?
Oh yeah, I mean this is the forerunner to text messaging, isn't it?
Yeah, I got my first mobile in 1999, and I'm sure they'd been around a wee bit before that.
Yeah. Well, we know that. We've seen it in Columbo before then.
Yeah, but I mean, SMS
Yeah, sure.
style. Anyway, she didn't have SMS, she had a pager type device, and it stopped communicating at 12:32.
And Columbo knows at 12:32 she was at the funeral home.
Yes.
So he goes back over there, and Mrs. Lerby arrives to pick up the urn.
Ah, this annoyed me.
Yeah, she remarks about its weight.
Yeah, so convenient that Columbo would be there just at that moment. We've complained about this in the past.
Yeah. And a staff member offers to show Columbo around the facility and the processes that they go through.
It also makes no sense that they dumped all the ashes in one urn when you could have put some of them out in the garden or anything.
The bin.
Yes.
Yeah. Prince is unhappy to overhear the explanation by the staff member of storage and who has keys, etc. to the place. So he enters and he sends Gerald on his way. Another Gerry.
Yet another one.
Yeah.
He and Columbo look at the oven and they talk about the weight of ashes.
They do. And Columbo appears sort of amused or bemused by Prince's his chatter. He also has a fair amount of gumption because he hands Columbo the murder weapon.
He does, it's quite good. They talk about things that don't burn.
Yes, like what?
Titanium.
Yeah.
Diamond.
And Columbo mentions actually that or Prince mentions to Columbo that a man of his size would burn down to about £5.
Yeah, the weight of the ashes, yeah.
Prince, I think, he seems to realise that he's getting too close to the truth of this discussion, and he tries to distract Columbo with what?
Well, he directly challenges Columbo to say what does he think has happened. And Columbo says he thinks Verity was killed at the funeral and cremated.
But they then go on to talk about dancing Dan Riley's dancing shoes.
Oh, they get a little brief chat about that, but I think Prince at this point is now aware he's the suspect.
Yeah, but I think he's confident enough in his method that he believes that there's no trace.
Well, at the end of the scene, he lets Columbo go with the remark that there's no body and there's no proof of any switch.
Yeah, well, let's explain. So they walk back through to the main service room. They discuss what things that wouldn't burn, as you said, and he mentions her phone, how it cut off at 12:32, and Prince asks what caused it, and Columbo admits at this point that is the burning question. There's a few plays and words in this episode towards the end. Yeah. I think they both accept the accusation that's made, and Prince asks if Columbo has any bodies. He admits that he does not, and I think they both appear to be having fun. The characters and the actors, I think, are enjoying this.
Yeah, this
scene.
head-to-head.
Yeah. Over to Lizzie's house again, and she is worse for wear and confesses to Columbo. She confesses that she scattered Chuck's ashes over the Hollywood sign, and Columbo appears to have an epiphany at this point. Tells her, that's another euphemism, that she will be arrested like no one has been arrested before.
Bit harsh. We head back to the funeral home for Riley's funeral.
We do.
Tap dancer performance.
Yes. Very theatrical services, isn't it?
Yeah, Columbo watches, and this is his slightly inappropriate funeral behaviour. He talks to Prince during the service.
Yeah. What does he want to talk about?
He wants to meet Prince.
Well, he doesn't know.
Well, he wants to talk to him now, but
Yes.
Prince says it's not appropriate. We'll meet at 9 tonight.
Yeah. Again, one of the few people who do put Columbo in his place and explain that this is not appropriate.
Yeah, but I think Columbo's quite happy because I think he wants it to be around about 9. I think that works well for him.
Yeah. So it is now 9 p.m. and they're in Prince's office. They have tea. And Columbo tells him that he has been chasing guys like him for 25 years. Now that timeline is again nonsense.
That's rubbish. He says he's caught them all apart from you, which is not true.
No, he's let some go. Well, I suppose he's caught them.
Has he?
Yeah, he hasn't progressed with it. He hasn't arrested them, but you can still catch someone without... I might catch you at it. I might catch you doing something. Doesn't mean to say I have to take it any further.
Sure. Why am I telling you this? Because it makes me feel good.
Yes. He also says he hates to lose. I've not really seen that side of Columbo before.
No, it's competitive.
Yeah.
And seeking justice.
He goes on to tell Prince that he knows that he put the diamonds down Dorothea's mouth all those years ago for collection the next day.
Columbo says there's going to be one arrest that night.
And we hear a helicopter arrive in the background. It's odd, isn't it?
Yeah, Prince is confused, so he goes to check, and Columbo is gifted the tongs from the sugar cubes.
Yes, he places them in his pocket and walks outside.
Yeah, he means he offered them by Prince, he doesn't just take them. He would never do that.
See, this is quite a contrived thing, isn't it? I mean, who would offer someone sugar tongs?
It makes no sense.
It's only so he can get into an urn. I mean, that's the only reason.
Yeah, and how's Prince going to dispense his sugar?
Yeah, lazy.
Where he's going, he don't need sugar.
No. Yeah.
They go outside and Liz is there, and Columbo explains that she's being arrested.
Why?
Because she scattered the ashes.
And he brings in the pilot to validate or verify this criminal activity.
He too is being arrested.
Mm-hmm. Or questioned, certainly. They
discover not only is Mrs. Lerby there, but also the Lerby ashes.
Yeah, she arrives a moment later with... No, he gets the urn from the helicopter pilot, is that right?
That's right.
Why does he want this urn?
Because he thinks it does not contain just Mr. Lerby.
Now, Mr. Prince, if you did cremate Chuck Houston on Thursday, as you claim, when Mrs. Houston spread those ashes over the Hollywood Hills, Chuck and everything with him ended up on that hillside. But if you didn't, if instead his body was switched. Chuck Houston had a piece of shrapnel in him. Piece of shrapnel made of stainless steel. Hardest metal on earth, sir, like titanium, won't melt if you put 2,000 degrees on it. Hard evidence, very distinctive shape. I think the chances that this piece of metal is going to match Mr. Houston's x-rays are pretty good. Now, sir, perhaps you can explain how a piece of Mr. Houston's 50-year-old war record ended up in the urn of a 48-year-old leisure wear importer from Sherman Oaks.
Very good. Very, very good. Would you excuse me, please?
Where you going, Mr. Prince?
I'm going to the police car. I'm wondering whether we should travel separately or perhaps you care to join me.
Well, that's up to you, sir. It's your funeral.
That would have been a fine final scene for Columbo, wouldn't it?
It would have. Not only would that have been a fine final scene, it would have been a fine final episode.
It was a really good episode. Although, surely he's got an explanation. It was just there in the oven from the previous cremation.
Well, I've got issues. We'll get to that in the episode review, but I've got issues with the gotcha.
Yeah. Also, he could have burned the bodies the other way around. How did Columbo know which order he did them in?
Let's get to that.
Yeah. Rita's not in this scene, but you should probably talk about her.
Yeah. Who was played by Catherine McGowan, daughter of Patrick. She was born in 1952. Not really been in that much. She was in The Girl Next Door, Beginners, Evan Almighty, but not much of a career in front of the camera. So as mentioned, Patrick McGowan directed. And he directed this episode, which was first broadcast on the 8th of October 1998 at 86 minutes in length. This was his 4th of 5 Columbo directorial roles, so one more to go.
That's exciting.
He was also the uncredited writer of this episode, or he had an uncredited credit. Like in a previous episode, he decided to drastically rewrite parts of the script.
Didn't go quite so badly wrong this time.
No. The official writer was Geoffrey Hatcher, who is more of a playwright, but he has recently penned The Duchess, The Mentalist, an episode of it, Casanova, and Mr. Holmes.
That movie, I liked that movie.
Yeah.
It was a good film. For once, a movie that I've seen on the podcast.
McGowan himself, this is his 4th and final acting role in Columbo, and also his last ever on-screen role. He has 2 other credits to his name, the final one actually being, we've mentioned this before in his first episode, Treasure Planet, but that was a voice role only. He had 2 final voice roles, but this was the last time he was seen on screen.
There you go.
Nice way to finish.
Not bad at all. He gets taken off to prison and we never see him again.
A little bit of trivia. Verity's dog is named Lulu. Now that's after Lulu Parson, a real-life gossip reporter. Quite an infamous, not, if you're being kind, you'd perhaps call her a bit of a character, a bit of a sort.
Right.
But I think she was quite vicious and she would quite happily ruin careers, I think, and she was syndicated through the Hearst network, and I think she towed that political party line. So if you got on her wrong side, she could do your career quite a bit of damage, I think, and I think she quite enjoyed it.
Right.
Episode review.
Okay.
Motive.
Protect his business, his reputation.
Yep. To silence a blackmailer.
Yeah.
Alibi.
He was with the widow.
Yeah. Clues. Quite a lot here. So the missing picture and the picture itself of the house, the unfed dog, Prince not calling Verity, the brochure missing from the handbag, the PH and the SB clues, the lipstick shades, the missing diamonds from Dorothea, Eddie's confession, and the phone pager being cut off.
And the shrapnel in the urn.
That's more about the sort of gotcha,
Okay,
I
right.
suppose, yeah. Yeah, the gotcha is the shrapnel in the Lerby urn.
Yeah.
Now, I think I might have to use the proof clip here.
Well, it may be the last time, so let's give it another airing.
Will you give me proof, Lieutenant? Where is your proof, Lieutenant?
And the reason for that was that easy explanation. Oh, I messed up and I burned the wrong body. I put the wrong body in the wrong urn.
Yep. Or the shrapnel maybe just wasn't brushed out after the Houston cremation.
Yeah. I don't think this proves anything.
Also, how does Columbo know he burned Houston second and not Verity?
Yeah. I think this is all over the place. Unless you find his body. At the moment she's still just a miss. I don't think there's enough here to call this murder.
Yeah, and even if you can prove that Houston was burned with this other guy, it doesn't prove that she was burned at any particular time, or that she was killed.
Oh, they don't know she's dead. They cannot prove she's dead.
No.
And because of the nature of her job, and as I mentioned in real life, Lubella, if you are spreading gossip, this is the type of thing that could cost careers and therefore cost millions of pounds. There must be plenty of people with motive to want to see her rid of.
Yes.
So we have no body. We have no murder case. We have plenty of other potential suspects. Yep.
Yeah. I think he's going to walk.
Well, season review for that discussion.
Next up.
Next up is Murder with Too Many Notes.
Penultimate episode of Columbo.
It is indeed.
Until then, please do keep rating, reviewing, subscribing on iTunes to help more Columbo fans find the show. Chip in on columbopodcast.com. Don't be shy on the latest episode or on any episode. And find us on Facebook and Twitter as well for some social interaction. And we will see you next week. Cheerio.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Columbo Podcast from Heard Yet Media.